Good morning. Happy Sabbath. How many of you have heard about activated charcoal? Quite a few hands, yep. So activated charcoal is similar to just regular charcoal. Do you know what the difference is? I didn't either until I had to do this. Then I went online and I was like, what does activated mean? So basically activated charcoal is just a process that regular charcoal goes through to become medicine, essentially. It is put through an intense heating process to open up lots of pores within itself so that it becomes super absorbent and effective in dealing with all kinds of ailments, including poisoning and toxic buildup and the things that I was going to talk about, which actually were not a lot of what was online, but it's used for lots of things. I don't know, have any of you ever used charcoal medicinally in any way, shape, or form? Actually, quite a few hands. That's good. It would be interesting if we had more time to find out like what you used it for, but in the medical world, and I don't know if they use it where you work in the ER, but they do use it for poisoning, and they use it also for diarrhea caused by cancer drugs, and they use it to lower phosphate levels in dialysis. They use it to help prevent hangovers, and they even use it in pregnancy for biofluid problems. And they also use it sometimes topically inside bandages to heal wounds. So that was interesting. I actually hadn't used it for really any of those purposes necessarily, but growing up, we used charcoal like a natural remedy for quite a bit of things, and it's worked amazing. It's helped my family a lot. So I kind of wanted to talk about the ways that we used it. Another one of the ways they did talk about was using it for an upset stomach. And so upset stomach can happen from a lot of different things, but our family actually did use it for that. My mom got the flu really bad one time, and she became so sick she couldn't keep anything down for 4 to 5 days. That meant that she was dehydrating, right? Because she couldn't keep water, food, anything down. And finally she became so weak she couldn't even get out of bed to go to the bathroom. And we called the doctor, and he was off duty. It was one of our friends, and he's like, yeah, you definitely need to get fluid IVs and stuff, because obviously you're not able to keep things down. Meanwhile, his wife was looking up other things that could be done, and she said, well, in the meantime, why don't you put a charcoal poultice on your stomach and see what happens? So the doctor told my mom, or my dad who was talking to him, he's like, well, go ahead and try that before you drive 65 miles to get the IV, because she's not feeling good. Just see if it'll work. We were absolutely floored. I can still remember it to this day, and it was a lot of years ago. My dad just took a little bit of charcoal, mixed it up with water, the charcoal powder, put it in a damp paper towel with a couple of different layers, and then put it on her tummy and wrapped it with saran wrap just to keep it from falling out. And literally she never vomited after that at all. And within 30 minutes, all her nausea started to leave her, and she was able to start taking in water and food without losing it. It was the turnaround point for her within 30 to 45 minutes. So we were forever sold on that. So now, I was visiting my sister in September, and she is pregnant, and she started vomiting. So we thought, it was pregnancy related, even though she hadn't really been having much nausea and she hadn't been vomiting. But we just chalked it up to that. But there were some things that didn't add up, and so finally, and she just started dry heaving, and there was some other things that just didn't add up to pregnancy, especially since she didn't have those symptoms before. And I was like, I think we should really try charcoal. And she's like, well, I want to drink a little bit in water. And I was like, but you're just throwing everything up, so I don't know if you want to try that. She's like, well, I still want to try it. And then I said, well, let me make you a charcoal poultice for your tummy really quick. So I made it for her. She never vomited again after that, and all of her nausea left in just within 20 minutes. And so I was like, man, I shouldn't have thought about pregnancy so much at the beginning, because it really wasn't that. And then I was like, she told me that she had been out getting elderberries. You know how they use that for a syrup? And she's made a lot of elderberry syrup before, and she was making something with that for because she was feeling like she might be on the edge of getting sick or something. And so I asked her, did you cook that before you took it? And she said, oh no, I didn't, because I was in a hurry. And I was like, I read something about like when you use elderberries raw, like they have cyanide in them. And so anyway, she had probably a low grade like cyanide poisoning from the little bit that she had taken, and her body was just an uproar against it. And so that charcoal like just grabbed those toxins and the poison and got it out of her system, trapped it and took it out, and she was totally fine. And then when I called her, talking to her about this before I was coming here, she's like, well, you should also mention that my daughter, she was 4, she started vomiting, and little kids sometimes have a hard time internalizing charcoal, like taking it down. The trick for my kids is putting a little bit in applesauce. They think it's really special applesauce because it's black, and they think that's like a novel thing, which I did too when I was a kid. And so you just mix a little bit for a kid, just a little bit in applesauce, and give it to them, and that can really help a lot. But her daughter got too smart to think it was a novel thing, and she didn't want to take it. So she was vomiting every few hours or whatever, and finally my sister was like, oh, I'm just going to put a charcoal poultice on you because you're not taking it internally, really, and so enough to make any difference. So she put a charcoal poultice on her, never vomited again. It was her turnaround point. So I am like 100% sold on the amazing effects of activated charcoal. If you're not convinced enough about how well is, oh, the other example about this, do you remember last winter when almost everyone, or a big percentage of the people that came to church on a specific Sabbath that evening or the next morning started vomiting? Do you remember that? Mm-hmm. Yes. It was like a church-wide deal. So Austin that night started vomiting. And of course we didn't know at that point that everybody that came to church that Sabbath was too, just about. But so he vomited. That's how we first knew like he wasn't feeling good. And so then we took care of him, and he went back to bed, and then my husband and I went to bed, and all of a sudden my husband's like, I don't know, I'm starting to get a little queasy in my tummy. And I was like, it just hit me too. I was like, let's grab the charcoal, because we just saw what happened to Austin. And then we grabbed the charcoal, and it completely went away. We caught it like that, and nothing happened to us. And so anyway, then we found out the next day that it was like this church-wide event. But we were thankful because charcoal actually just took care of it for us. And it's not a huge amount of charcoal. It can be little. Now, I was actually shocked because when I looked up like the dosages that they use at the hospital, I don't know, this was from the WebMD, whatever. I figure it's a pretty good source. But anyway, they were saying like for poison that people get, you use a good amount of charcoal to grab all that stuff. But like at home use for our family, we don't have to use like 25 or 50 milligrams or 100 grams. Grams, yeah, I messed up, sorry. I meant grams, but yeah, like we use like a teaspoon, or a tablespoon max. But for poisoning, they use a lot. So it takes a lot to really, probably before you'll have much side effects. Do you know what your side effects are for charcoal use? Well, if you get huge amounts, you can get constipated. Yeah. Or, because it's doing all that, or, they say that your number 2 will be black. Well, obviously. And I don't think that anybody's going to worry about that if they're not feeling sick. Do you? Like, that's a pretty easy side effect. And obviously, if there's huge amounts, I'm sure there can be, it's not supposed to be used all the time. It's short-term use that's very effective. And when I was looking online too to see what other people use it for, I was amazed how many things people are using it for, actually, like for whitening teeth and for their skin, because it can pull toxins out of your skin for more beautiful skin. Like, it's amazing. Of course, those aren't necessarily full of studies behind them, and we don't need those. All I wanted to tell you guys was how amazing it works for just your family. To me, like, it should be an item in a first aid kit, because it's so helpful for things to counteract poisons so immediately. So my last story that I'm going to use, we were out hiking. We actually were gone all day one Sabbath. We had church with a lot of our church family out in the wilderness. We were having a special Waldensian adventure, Waldensian Sabbath, where we studied about the history of the Waldenses out in the bulwarks of the mountains. It was so amazing. I was thinking it would be so fun to do that with our church family here. It was such a powerful experience. But after we had our church service there, we went on a hike to go up to the top of the ridge and look down on the beautiful valley below. And my dad got stung by 2 bald hornets. And I don't know if any of you have gotten stung by those before, but they're really nasty. Before this event, he had never ever had any allergic reaction on any level to bees or wasps or anything. But he was holding my little brother, and he didn't realize that he had stepped up a nest, and they came up out of the ground, and they were just pumping. They just keep pumping until you knock them off. But he had my little brother, and he was worried about him. And so, you know, it's just seconds, but still seconds of venom or whatever it is that bees give. Correct me if I'm wrong about what that is. They pumped a lot into his body. So he quickly threw my brother up the mountain, out of the way, and then he knocked them off, and he's like, you know what, I probably better head back down to the bottom, because he already started feeling symptoms that were not good. Now you have to remember, we were way out in the middle of nowhere in the mountains, and once we would get down to the bottom of the mountain, it was a 45-minute drive to the closest little dinky town where you call the doctor to come in. So anyway, of course, back in the day, there was no cell phones that we had up there, nothing. So it was pretty scary. So somebody had charcoal in their fanny pack, another person had charcoal in their pack, and we started just taking it internally before his throat started to close, and then like putting it on the outside to draw the poison out. And it was a very scary experience. His body went into anaphylactic shock, and his whole head was like a huge basketball. I couldn't recognize him when I came off the mountain because I was up higher. By the time I got down and caught up to him, he was unrecognizable except for the coat he had on. And he was extremely sick, and he was becoming delirious. But what is amazing is that the charcoal, God's blessing of that charcoal, saved his life that day, because there was no EpiPen. There was no other means, and his throat was closing, but it didn't close all the way, and the doctor basically said if he had not had that, he would have died, because the toxins from that sting were just filling his body so full of poison that his body was just shutting down. So thankfully, because he had that, even though he had to get all the way out, thankfully there was a couple of big guys that could help him walk out, because he got to the place where he couldn't walk normal anymore. And they supported him and helped him get out. And then that 45-minute drive, I think, turned into a 30-minute drive. My mom said, if my husband gets out of this alive and we all get out of the car alive, we'll be really thankful, because they were driving so fast down the mountain roads. But I mean, ever after that, I was just like, there's no way we're going on hikes or anything without charcoal, because that stuff is, and you know, now my dad has to carry EpiPen too, because he gets anaphylactic shock reactions now just to the nick of a bee. So anyway, I am a firm believer in the benefits of activated charcoal. It's blessed my family many times over, and I hope that it will bless your family if you ever have any need for it. But just remember that God has provided resources in His creation that can help us in our times of need if we just take it along with us. Thank you. So